Hello, welcome to the Talking City podcast. And if you listened to us on Friday, it was a joint podcast with the Manchester is Red guys from the Manchester Evening News. Today, Manchester is certainly blue. It was a derby win for City yesterday at the Etihad. Phil Foden led City to a 3-1 win. Did go behind from a very, very good goal from Mark Rashford, but it was always going to be City's day in the end. My name's Joe Bray. Joining me is Simon Bajkowski. Simon, not a bad derby, was it?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to bring it up on the Friday about Manchester is red because it's just not been red for so long. But yeah, certainly another blue weekend. It was it was a good game. It was an exciting game. It had some very good goals, and it had the result that was deserved, despite what Eric Ten Hag might think. So it was an important 3 points, an important performance, an important result for City in the end. So I don't think they could have really asked for much more.
No, I think when you look at it from the end, you're thinking, fantastic, 3 goals, City were on top throughout. But at half-time, 1-0 down, City are doing very well, but they're just not putting the ball in the back of the net. You're thinking everything they did against Luton to sort of banish those goal-scoring difficulties have returned. They're on top, but they conceded a wonder goal. You're thinking, is it going to happen again? And if you were going into the derby, you're thinking, right, United's best chance is to probably get a goal against the run of play and defend it for their lives. And it looked like they might have done that. But as we said, Phil Foden stepped up. Let's start with that first half. It sounded like watching it on telly, there was just silence when Rashford put that ball in the back of the net. And what a goal it was.
Silence other than a very raucous away end who couldn't quite believe it. I don't think anyone in the stadium could believe it. I'm not sure which induced more shock in the game, whether it was Rashford scoring or Haaland missing, but certainly after the opening sort of spell as well, because, I think the first 5 minutes City had 54 passes to United's 1, and that one wasn't a completed pass. So when kind of I can't remember who put the cross in, maybe De Bruyne, and Onana collects, you're certainly not thinking, right, well, in 4 seconds time United are scoring here, but they did, and it was kind of like, was it Diaz, was it Ake was kind of playing in Fernandez on, but it was Diaz's side, and it goes down as another simple goal that City should avoid conceding, but it also goes down as an unstoppable goal that you can't do much about it once the ball is laid back to Rashford, because it's just an incredible hit. Those goals that sort of smack in off the top of the crossbar are always quite emphatic to see. Everyone wants to score that goal, don't they? Like, you'd love to score any goal, but that goal is the one. So it was having been a really commanding start from City, they were suddenly behind.
I think looking from the outside, it felt like that was part of the shock, because it wasn't just, they've conceded. It was, wow, that's a really good goal. You don't want to sort of doff your hat to a United player, but you literally can't do anything about that. I think Gary Neville said on commentary it was a 1 in 30 chance that would go in, and then later corrected himself and said it was a XG of 0.03. So it's one of them where there is nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
Well, he corrected it, about just over. It was, the XG became a sort of a pattern of the game, because then Haaland goes and misses a 0.89 chance where I don't know what he was doing. That was another one where you're thinking, is it going to be this day where everything goes against City? Was that another moment where it was just sort of bemusement in the stadium?
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably up there for misses with the Community Shield one. His very first game for City against Liverpool, and it's probably worse. I'd say this one's
probably a harder to miss.
And it kind of summed City up, because they had dominated the half, but they hadn't been great in the final third. Bernardo Silva wasn't great. Kevin De Bruyne was worse than that. Jeremy Doku just wasn't on it. Foden was kind of trying, but they weren't really finding Erling Haaland. So they had all this domination, and I think they had kind of 10 corners in the first half an hour. So they were sort of all over United in one respect, but at the same time, there'd only really been that one Foden chance with Onana that didn't kind of wasn't hit with conviction. So it was one of those where they were they were on top, but United were pretty comfortable with what they had. I mean, United. I struggle to speak about what United did, but it was they kind of knew they were up against it in midfield, so they just kind of didn't play with the midfield. It was really strange. They were sort of like 9-0-1 out of possession, and then kind of 7-0-3 in on the very rare occasion when they did get possession. It wasn't like that they then had a midfield. They just sort of had, three fast runners who they would then sort of hit the ball over the midfield to and try and break. So, they were interesting tactics, but it was just strange to see United so deep with so many players. And, it was one of those where it kind of, you sort of thought as the game goes on, can this continue? And, it shouldn't have done in the first half because Haaland should have put the ball in the net. But, the longer it went on, you're still thinking, surely they can't keep getting away with this.
I think that's what you need to get a result against City. Like Chelsea did it. They had the chances on the break. They weren't trying to dominate the ball. They were just trying to sort of work those transitions. And at the other end, Haaland was missing chances and City were not putting the ball in the back of the net. And you need a bit of luck, don't you, when you come to City? I've been speaking to some friends who are United fans and they're really unhappy with the United performance. But I think if you go into City, regardless of who you are, even if it's your biggest rivals, you kind of do have to change the way you play and sort of shut up shop a little bit and try and do that. I think the first half performance for United was spot on. They got the look, they got the goal, they did what they sort of needed to do. The second half, maybe they could have pushed a bit more, but I think they ran out of legs and players who are sort of first team standard. But I don't see too much criticism of United in the first half. I don't think they should be criticised for playing differently to how they usually do.
No, but it's kind of connected, isn't it? Because the second half performance was the same as the first half performance. It was just they were more tired in the second half because they'd put so much effort in the first half. So it is one of those things where you think, you see it starting and you think if you play like this, you will do well to last 90 minutes playing like this. And they're not the first team to have, taken that approach at the Etihad. But it is, a surprise when you consider, how Aston Villa dominated Manchester City in December, the last time City lost, when you consider Spurs coming in scoring 3 goals, Chelsea taking City on at the Etihad, Liverpool doing the same. It certainly wasn't a performance that kind of each to their own. But I would sort of say, United's successes against City have come when they've played counter-attacking football. Solskjaer was particularly good at setting United up like that, although it was just like this didn't really feel like counter-attacking football. It felt like let's keep everyone in the box football and then, once every 20 minutes, boot the ball down. I think when a team has had more shots than you've had possession, it is a fairly damning indictment of how you've played. And can you be coming away from that game thinking, yeah, we've played really well. We've had 26% possession and we've given up 27 shots. I'm not sure that you can. Not to say that they would have done better if they'd played differently, but I'm not sure they can come away and say, oh, we've done well there.
No, it certainly wasn't a sort of a close game like Ten Hag was saying. And Ten Hag was pointing to the sort of refereeing decisions that were absolutely spot on that somehow went against him. I think if they kept up the way they played in the first half and the intensity, it would have been a good game plan, but it clearly wasn't working and Ten Hag couldn't change it, and it sort of unravelled from the moment he equalised, I think, for United. So what started off as an acceptable game plan sort of went away from them, and that's why I think people are saying they didn't play well and people aren't happy. But I don't think they should be criticised for starting like that. I just don't think this sums up the quality between the two sides. I just don't think they had enough in, whether it was on the sidelines or in on the bench or whatever, to match City as the game went on. And City used that experience, didn't they, to just keep on going. And keep pushing them, and even when 8 minutes goes up, you think, oh, what's going to happen here? They press United into a mistake. Haaland gets that goal and the sort of relief all around, and that sort of it's the third goal that's probably more impressive than anything else, because they're pushing, aren't they, City? They're being ruthless when they need to be.
Yeah, and it should be said as well that kind of United did do all right after they conceded. It kind of felt like, oh, City are going to go on and steamroll them now, and they didn't. And it was really the sort of United changes when Anthony came on and Kambala came on, and Foden had been giving Lindelof all kinds of problems on the right, and it looked like he was teeing up to sort of have him whenever he wanted. And then United made those changes, and Pep sort of switched Foden over to the left and put De Bruyne out on the left. You're thinking, Foden's got his man here, like, why has he moved him? But Guardiola kind of clearly thinking that right side was now a weakness, with, maybe Anthony not tracking back and Kambala kind of inexperienced. So De Bruyne combines with Foden and Alvarez on the left, and City get the winner. And, after that, the way United had played, there was no way of coming back for them with being so defensive. They didn't have a shot between the 23rd minute and the 99th. So it was fairly one-way traffic for the whole game. So as soon as City took the lead, they were never going to lose it. But it did kind of require some breaking down from City to get the job done.
It surprised me that there were a few stats that City sort of broke, if you like. It's the first time United have lost a game in 140 odd sort of games that they've led at half time, which is surprising, I think, against United, given how they've been playing over the last few years. But also, City have, these derbies have been close, and it's never always been the team that leads that wins. I think it's City's the first time City have won 3 home league derbies since 1955, which again feels a bit sort of against the way that the power shift has been in Manchester. But I suppose, as Pep said on Friday, the record that he has is better at Old Trafford than at the Etihad. So 3 wins in a row, 3 dominant wins, is sort of a shift in that sort of positive direction for him as well. Before we get on to Phil Foden, who obviously had a fantastic game, I thought Julian Alvarez coming on for Doku, who was a bit disappointing, changed that game. I didn't have him down to start at all. I didn't have Doku down to start, but I didn't have Alvarez down to start. He sort of played his way back into contention again in these big games, and he added that sort of body close to the box and helped City get from 1-1 to 2-1 and 3-1.
Yes. I thought Kovacic would start rather than Doku, so it was kind of interesting that it was Doku that got the start. Doku didn't really he just looks like his confidence has dipped a bit. Like he's not quite enjoying himself at the minute and doesn't quite know what to do. There was kind of one moment where he kind of
I think he's been listening to this podcast where you've been slagging him off.
Yeah, maybe. He sort of, dribbled a bit down the wing and took the ball past a few players, but went out of play. And Guardiola was like really animated, like slapping him and giving him a high five and, getting the crowd to applaud what he'd done. And it felt like they're trying to make it work, but it just wasn't quite. And in a game where City were kind of suffocating United by never giving the ball away, whenever they gave it to Doku, they kind of gave the ball away. So it was just that bit of falling down at the last. So yeah, you want your subs to come on and make a difference, and Alvarez did exactly that. And he's not been in the best form of late, but it was a lovely 1-2 with Foden to set up the goal, and that will push him back into Pep's mind. I'm pretty sure he will get a game against Copenhagen, and he could put himself back in the frame for Anfield.
Erling Haaland, we've spoken about his miss, which was, I think, might have been Gary Lineker or Gary Neville said he's got to go with it with his head. I'm not sure about that, but he's just got to get it in the back of the net, and it was. I think it's fair to say it's his worst miss and easily the miss of the season. But he responded, didn't he? And he had a few chances, and sort of the relief on his face when he scored that goal at the end. A, he was never going to miss, and B, he knew that he had to absolutely score that given what had happened. What did Guardiola say about that after the game? Because he was pretty sort of defensive of Haaland, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he just said he can miss another 5 like that for all I care. He was like, he can be sad for 10 seconds after he misses that chance, and then he can miss another 5 and he can be sad for 10 seconds more, and then he can forget about it and score the next one. And that, you know, Guardiola said that is what separates the best players in football, tennis, basketball, golf, any of these, you know, sports where you get serial champions from kind of anyone else who plays the game. And that is what Guardiola sees in Haaland, and that is what kind of he's pointed out quite a few times. I mean, I also wanted to sort of just say that Haaland's build-up play was pretty good, and there have been plenty of times when, you know, he maybe hasn't played that well, but got a goal or got 2 goals. And I mean, for a long time on yesterday, it felt like he was going to have actually played okay, but just not done the one big job that he needs to do, and that is put the ball in the net when it comes to him, certainly when it comes to him in the position that it did at the end of the first half. And he'd had a few headers as well that he hadn't done too well with. So yeah, it was okay, and he did respond as he needed to, and, you know, showed that when he does miss one, he's not going to miss the next one.
And he absolutely loves the derby, doesn't he? He's the celebrations when Foden scored. He got the fans doing the Poznan afterwards. He wouldn't have minded if he didn't score and City won. That's the kind of sort of player he is. I agree with you. I think his build-up play for the last few weeks has been really good, even if his sort of finishing has been a little bit erratic in both directions. But he's the player you want on your team in these games, even if he's not scoring.
Yeah, and I only kind of twigged this morning, but Haaland and Foden have scored all the goals against United this season. So that is 6 out of 6 from City fans, and they also scored 6 against them last season. So from a City point of view, there is no better feeling than you know, supporters of your club scoring goals against your biggest rivals. So it was, you know, exactly what the fans would have wanted when they turned up. And, you know, Guardiola will be delighted with Foden, obviously, but also pleased that Haaland is ticking along. I think that's 28 in 30 for the season. So, you know, you're looking at another season of 40 plus goals from him.
It's no wonder whenever we ask Pep, like, "Oh, Haaland's not scored today, or he missed this chance," then he doesn't entertain the questions, does he? He is very aware that Haaland is scoring a lot of goals and will continue to score goals.
Yeah, well, I always remember when we spoke to him before the Champions League final, Haaland, and he'd not been in great form, and someone put it to him like, you know, you've got 1 goal in your last 6 or 1 goal in your last 8. And he just kind of said, yeah, that's one way of looking at it. I mean, another way is I've got 52 in 52 and 7 assists as well. You're like, yeah, you do always score a lot of goals. So they will come. And that's the thing. If he can score in games like that when he's not playing well, then you do see what he can do at Luton when he does.
I think if you'd said last week he's going to score 6 goals in the next 2 games, you'd have taken that. I think we'll leave the chat there for the first part of this podcast. We will come back and discuss Phil Foden in a lot more detail after another very influential display against United. Welcome back to the Talking City podcast. We are talking everything about Manchester City's big Derby Day win against United. We've got this far without properly touching on Phil Foden, perhaps intentionally because it's the obvious place to go. It's another big game, and another big game he's sort of taken by the scruff of his neck and said, "We don't have control of this. I'm going to control it." And he was fantastic, wasn't he? And if Rashford hadn't scored his goal, then we'd be talking about Foden's goal for a long time, I think.
Yeah, it was almost as good. When you see the power with which it's hit, and it just absolutely flies past Onana. And it was another game for City where the opposition goalkeeper plays quite well, and Haaland misses a chance, and you're thinking, oh, is this going to be one of those days? And it was another game for City, and another game for Foden, where Foden has just said, no, I'm winning this game for City. Thanks very much. We talked about it at Brentford when he got his hat-trick. And just, again, Pep said it afterwards, like every time he got the ball, you felt like something was going to happen. And you really did. He was just so dangerous all afternoon. And like I say, De Bruyne wasn't really on it. Silva wasn't fully on it, but Foden was. And to stand out as kind of the most dangerous threat in that team with those players is pretty phenomenal. And yeah, it feels like people are waking up to the realization of the footballer that Phil Foden is, because he kind of had a disappointing season last year. Injuries didn't help, but he was kept out of the team on form as well a lot of the time. But the way he has responded, we talk about how Pep sort of speaks about Haaland as one of the best in the world. Well, Foden is that as well. Even Pep, in the way that he speaks about Foden now, he can't even deny it, or there's no. For so long, there's been caveats to what he's saying, and then yesterday he was just like, yeah, he's been the best player in the league. And you think,
which is a departure, isn't it? We've spoken about this, that Guardiola sort of tempered sort of expectations and excitement of Foden, and always said he's got to do more. He's got to learn how to play in the centre, and then he's had that run in the centre. He's done really well, but he's been moved out wide to cater for De Bruyne. He's playing anywhere across that front three now, or sort of behind Haaland and the two wing positions, and he's influencing the game. And I think that's it shows how much he's learning in that position, and it's exactly what Guardiola wanted him to do, which is play in the centre, but also take it back to your other position. And the formation helps. You've got Kyle Walker coming forward on one side, and he's given that freedom to come inside. But when you're making the sort of impact that he is doing, I think that's quite stark. I was writing this morning about Foden when he played against Liverpool at Anfield in the 4-1 win, and that was sort of the first time he'd really taken control of a big game by himself and said, right, yeah, I'm going to do this. And then we don't always see it because he's obviously a young player, but it feels like every single game where City need up at the moment, that's what he's doing. And yeah, I think I tweeted after the game, he's easily City's best player of the season. And I was thinking, is that too sort of big to say? Is it fair? Is it not? Is there anyone else? Then Guardiola comes out and says he's the best player in the Premier League, and you can't really argue, can you? The way he's playing, no one else has sort of had an impact on such a consistent level, especially in the last 2 or 3 months.
I mean, people will argue, let's be honest. There's not a day goes by without Phil Foden versus Bukayo Saka debate being thrust upon us. That 2020-2021 season was really important, and Foden was really, really significant and scored huge goals. He was key in that Liverpool win at Anfield. He was absolutely critical against Dortmund in the Champions League quarter-final. Jude Bellingham and Erling Haaland were on that pitch, and Phil Foden was shades above them, like easily the best player on the pitch. But since that, he has kind of gone back inside himself a little bit, and he's not quite taken on that mantle. But this year he's really, really stepping up, and it is, it's lovely to see. And yeah, it kind of feels like, we both know how animated Pep gets with every player on the touchline, and he will always want more and more and more. And the moment after Foden's 2 goals, and then he sort of chases back half the length of the pitch and harries Garnacho out of play, and then kind of throws his arms up to the crowd, and Pep just put his hands above his head and clapped. And it wasn't like yes, let's have more of this or whatever. It was just kind of like, yeah, you've completed football, mate. Like, I've got no notes for you. You are now kind of officially one of my best talents, and I don't need to tell you what to do anymore. And considering it's only 3 months or less than 3 months since Foden was like giving away that late penalty against Crystal Palace, City drawing, not in great form, and Guardiola kind of really having these doubts still about whether Foden was cut out for the middle. And since then, in those 3 months, it has just been extraordinary how much he has improved, and he's absolutely flying.
It's some going to be better than De Bruyne and Haaland on a pitch and all these other players, and still have your manager say he's the best player in the Premier League. And you've got, Guardiola says this all the time. He says Haaland's the best player in the world because he is, or the best striker in the world. He says Rodri's the best midfielder. He's not shy of saying these big statements, but I don't know. This one felt like a bit more of a statement that had a bit more grounding in it, because you can't argue at all. I've been trying to think who else has had a better season, and I don't think there is any. And if City are going to go ahead now and go to Liverpool and play Arsenal and go and sort of try and defend these treble trophies, it looks like it's going to be Foden leading the way, where last year it was Haaland's goals and sort of De Bruyne's assists. But Foden looks like the one who's going to be central to it. And that's not to say the other players won't step up, and it is such a team unit, but Foden seems to be the one who wants to make the mark, and he's the one on the back pages today. And it's not Haaland when it has been in the past. It's Foden, and he seems to like that and relish that, and likes being the main man as well.
Yeah, and it's I think City's best players this season have probably been Foden, Rodri, and Ake. In terms of kind of consistency over what are we, 7-8 months in, and 2 assists for Rodri yesterday. That I think he's now on 7 goals and 7 assists for the season, which is a very good return from a holding midfielder, and you would expect him to have more. And he had that shot that Onana saved in the first half, so he's kind of playing very, very, very well. But Foden, 18 goals in 40 appearances this season. It's his best. It's really good for someone who's not a striker to be scoring at nearly a goal every 2 games. Is top class. He's playing slightly more forward than, say, Yaya Toure was when Toure scored 20 goals for City in the 13-14 campaign. But Foden could go on to be pushing 30 this season. Only Haaland and Watkins have more than him, which, considering they are both out and out strikers, just shows how incredible Foden's goal threat is, and how much he's able to sort of convert. Because again, in the last few years, his finishing hadn't been as good as it had kind of looked like it would be. So it's really good for him that he's kind of refound that ability to get the ball in the net. And maybe Onana can do better for the second, but from the moment he hits it, you're like, that's in. So he's just so influential at the minute to everything that City do. And like I say, Guardiola, having had so many kind of notes for him before, is now at a stage where he can just sit back and applaud like everyone else in the stadium.
And it's not just 18 goals, there's 10 assists as well, I'm looking, which is a goal or assist every game and a quarter about, which is not too bad. That's sort of close to Haaland levels, isn't it, for goal contributions within 90 minutes. And I'm glad you touched on Rodri, because I was going to mention that. The most notable thing Rodri did was smack the ground when Haaland missed his chance. He was absolutely furious. That's what I noticed. And I mean, it's one of them. He'll get the assist for Foden's goal, but Foden did all the work. But how many assists like that have other players got? It was his pressure for the third one, and he's now got the record, hasn't he, for games unbeaten in the English top flight since losing. Yeah. It's ridiculous how important it is, but also how he just does not lose and will not lose in a City shirt.
Yeah, and both games that they've played against Chelsea this year, he's stepped up and scored a late goal to preserve that unbeaten record. 59 games unbeaten is phenomenal, and he is, I'm sure, again, we get lots of, is Declan Rice better than Rodri? Rodri has been there and done it and got so many T-shirts, and he is head and shoulders the best in the league, and he continues to show it. And Ricardo Carvalho had the record, part of that incredible Chelsea team under Jose Mourinho, and it's kind of fitting that a player like Rodri in a team like this City one is the one to break that record, and quite nice to do it against United in the derby as well.
There's some similarities, isn't there, between that Mourinho side where they just won. They never played particularly great football, and that's not a similarity to this side. But there are a lot of games where City do just win, and it sort of goes under the radar that they don't always play this amazing football. But players like Rodri help you just grind out those wins. Before we move on to looking ahead, Ruben Dias stopped in the mix zone last night. I've read the comments. They're a little bit spiky, aren't they? Or yeah, am I misreading them?
No, only a few minutes of Ruben Dias. He, I don't know. Yeah, a few questions, and then he was very quickly off. He's quite an interesting character, Dias. I think I interviewed him 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he was 25 minutes early for a start, which is like unheard of. Usually, I think the one before that, it was like 2 hours late. The last person, I won't name them, but 25 minutes early but it kind of shows Diaz's focus, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm here. Let's get this done. Let's move on to the next thing." He's kind of very organised and everything like that. But he's sort of and he's incredibly intelligent. Like his English is phenomenal. I've used phenomenal so many times already this morning, but it was a good performance, and his English is great, but sometimes he doesn't like particular questions or anything like that. And there was a bit of talk about Liverpool, and he wanted to talk about Copenhagen, and there was a bit of talk about the treble, and he didn't really want to talk about the treble. So that was that. But it just does kind of show the mentality of this team, and Guardiola was the same. Asked about Liverpool and said Copenhagen. I'm going to be thinking about Copenhagen until Wednesday. Thank you very much, and then we will think about Liverpool. And it might be the case that they are thinking about Liverpool, but that is not the public way they're going to go about it. They're going to go one game at a time, and that starts with a Champions League game against a heavy underdog where they're already 3-1 up.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end part 2 and look ahead to part 3, where we will look ahead to Copenhagen, in the words of Guardiola. So back in a minute. Welcome back to the Talking City podcast. We've dissected the Manchester derby. I would guess that the inquest over at United will last a little bit longer, but we've got a game to look ahead to. As you mentioned, Simon, against Copenhagen, 3-1 winners. Another Phil Foden performance in Denmark ensured that it was not just a 2-1 win with a goal in it. That Foden goal late on really gave City a cushion that they can use in a big week where they've got Copenhagen to book a quarter-final place in the Champions League, Liverpool, and then on to Newcastle in the FA Cup. It's going to be one of these defining weeks, isn't it? Where we spoke last week about a defining month. Next week after that's going to be defining as well. But it's three games in the next 3. Yeah, the next 3 games, 3 competitions. Could make or break whether City do retain the treble or not. You would expect the Champions League will be the easiest of the 3, given that City took control of the tie in Denmark.
Yeah, you would think so. And they were they were the better team against Copenhagen, and you would expect them to be the better team again. Albeit they sort of caught Copenhagen a bit cold because Copenhagen hadn't played, that. I don't think they played for 2 months competitively. So there is kind of Copenhagen should be more balanced, but then I think they've won 2 and lost 1. I think they lost the most recent game. So they will have to seriously put in a performance at a ground where City haven't lost since November 2022. And they've played a lot of very good teams since then and have avoided defeat. They just, like on Sunday, even when United were ahead and had the advantage, you always kind of thought City would get back into it because they just have this feeling at the stadium where they're never going to go. And Guardiola said like the fans scored the second and third goals by creating the atmosphere for it, and I'm sure it'll be another one on Wednesday when the stadium kind of receives the team and roars them on to what they hope will be safe passage through to the quarterfinal. So it's always, you always kind of worry about these Champions League nights ahead of big games like Liverpool, because like Atalanta a few years ago, it went really, really wrong. But City kind of have enough going for them that they should be able to use it to build that platform before Liverpool.
And I think what they did at Luton was rest players, even though they had to win. They rested enough players with the derby in mind, so I can see some sort of changes. Maybe I don't think he'll rest key players because he will still see it's a Champions League game to win regardless of the score. I think he'll use his substitutes to do that. But like you said, Alvarez could come into the side. Probably Kovacic might come back. Those sort of changes. Maybe if Gvardiol is back in the squad, which is clearly a boost for City, maybe he'll get some minutes, and sort of Akanji coming in, those sort of players. I think he'll use that to make sure that he gets his squad to Anfield in the best condition that they are, while also booking a place in the quarterfinals. Liverpool are at Sparta Prague on Thursday, so they have a more difficult preparation for that game. But I think City will look at how they played in Copenhagen. They'll look at the fact that they won 5-0 against Copenhagen in the groups last season, and you would expect that a couple of early goals, or even just one early goal, will kill the tie and allow City to just continue that momentum and the unbeaten run that is ticking on quite nicely, isn't it? What are we on? 19 games, 20 games unbeaten?
19, I think. Yeah,
19. So 20. We would get on to 20 if City didn't lose and another game without defeat at the end. So this is also obviously assuming that it doesn't go terribly wrong, but it feels like a game where City have just control of the whole situation and know exactly what they're doing. Can you see any sign that it might not go to plan?
No, whatsoever. No. I just think, you think back to sort of 2016 when City took a 5-3 lead to Monaco in the last 16 and then went out, and the teams are like chalk and cheese. I think there are a few survivors like John Stones, but the mentality is completely different. And recovering 21 points in the Premier League from losing positions this year is just something that like they wouldn't have done before. And well known in the Champions League, sort of not being able to respond well to setbacks. They've really done that over the last 12 months or whatever. And yeah, it's going to be maybe like the Rico Lewis test. Does Guardiola trust his team enough for kind of Lewis to play this game instead of Walker? Because Lewis has been like a really valuable member of the team and was great in the Champions League group stages, but he's not really played since. He's had very little action. So, I would like to think that he'd get a start against Copenhagen, but Pep might think that there's just enough jeopardy in the game that he'd rather pick a safer option.
Yeah, I don't know what's happened to Lewis, because he's clearly a good player. Like you say, he's been playing a lot in midfield, but the midfielders have come back and Walker's got himself into form. Stones is back, so Akanji and Stones are now options at right back. He seems a bit out of out of favour, if you like. Not, I doubt it's anything that he's done. I think it's just the nature of all the players.
Yeah, just sort of down the pecking order, so to speak.
But yeah, maybe this game, particularly off the bench, you would think he's got a chance. I think you described the Luton game as the Sergio Gomez test, I think, which I don't think we'll be on that level. But again, we'll see if City get a lead and who comes off the bench. It will be more significant for me who would come off, a bit like we saw at Luton. We saw, Haaland. I can't remember who else came off, but there was a sort of 4 substitutes at once where it was like, okay, you guys are starting the derby. I think there'll be a similar sort of indication of how Guardiola takes it against Copenhagen.
Yeah, and because, we might not hear about Liverpool from Guardiola or whichever player speaks before the game, but it is about Liverpool, and we can talk about Liverpool, and it is a huge game on Sunday between two teams who, it's the top of the table clash between two sides that might start in second and third. The title race is just getting better and better. And, you had the drama on Saturday of Liverpool scoring in the 99th minute, the 9th minute of 8 added on, and then kind of City falling behind and then coming back and getting the win that keeps them right on Liverpool's tails. So, it would have been interesting if City had gone to Anfield ahead, but it's set up perfectly with them being within a win, but so that, City know that if they win, they will go above Liverpool. Liverpool know if they win, they will be more than a win above City with 10 games to go or whatever. So it is set up beautifully, and you've also got Arsenal in the background who, like I say, might be top by the time City and Liverpool kick off on Sunday.
That's it. Arsenal aren't even in the background, are they? They're firmly part of the equation, and I think it's easy to forget them as well. But I think these two games, obviously Liverpool and Arsenal next in the Premier League, albeit Arsenal at the end of the month, it's going to define City's chance of winning the titles. And sometimes you can get a draw. I think they need to win at least one of them. If they get anything less than 4 points, I think that's really damaging. So it's going to be a game or a run, as we've said, where they just can't afford to slip up. They started well against United, but Liverpool will be another test. I think Mo Salah's potentially back, which is just little bit daunting for City, in a different test than, say, if Harvey Elliott was on the wing. But not to say he's a bad player, but he's not Mohamed Salah. Then you've got Newcastle in the cup as well. It's going to be an interesting few games, but the start they made against United, it sort of shows, I think, the last week against United and Luton, that they're ready to sort of put the foot down a bit and motor on. It feels like that mentality is there. Is that something you've picked up?
Yeah, it is there, and also it's kind of, Guardiola loves the Champions League and never gets tired of bigging up what an achievement it is to be in the Champions League. So I think Copenhagen kind of feels like a bit low key, certainly like the least big game in the month. But kind of be under no doubt that Guardiola, if they get through, Guardiola's going to be tub thumping every player, saying, you're one of the best 8 teams in Europe again. City have done it again. So that's going to be a really kind of important way for them to set up these bigger games in the month.
Yeah, and we're talking about changes, but I think for that reason he's going to go very strong. I'm not saying full strength, but I think that the starting lineup is going to be stronger than most people think he should put out.
Yeah, I think it'd be similar to Luton. It'd be a strong team that you have no doubts will get the job done.
Can I get a score prediction from you?
I think 2-0. 2-0. I don't think it'll be huge, but I think it'll be solid enough.
I think they'll get an early goal, City, and that'll sort of end any hopes that Copenhagen had, and maybe 3-0. I'll say 4-0. I think they'll get a couple throughout, just as Copenhagen tire and know that the tie's beyond them. So we'll see how that pans out, and then we'll be back obviously later in the week to talk all things Liverpool. We'll try and give a bit of insight into what happened against Copenhagen, but assuming they get through, I'd imagine our next podcast will be solely Liverpool focused. I've seen this morning Trent Alexander-Arnold's been saying that Liverpool's titles mean more because they've spent less money on it. So that's a good place to start the week, I think, ahead of a big game like that. So please join us for that. Please follow, subscribe wherever you find us on social media, where you get your podcast platforms, and on YouTube. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back later in the week to review Copenhagen and preview Liverpool.